Hello, my name is John Reynolds. On this episode of Extraordinary Life Stories, I'm talking with Andrew Masraf. Andrew is the senior partner of mission-led multinational law firm Pinsent Masons. Andrew is a private equity specialist with particular experience in advising management teams and has led on a number of major transactions within the infrastructure sector. He has ultimate responsibility for the leadership of Pinsent Masons. I want to know why the nurturing of talent is so important to Andrew. He led a team which developed a growth mindset strategy in collaboration with Matthew Saeed, the former Olympic table tennis player and best-selling author, which achieved recognition from across the legal industry. I'm really looking forward to talking with Andrew. Andrew, thank you for joining me.
Thanks for inviting me. Really looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too. Tell me, who is Andrew Masraf?
So I'm the senior partner of Pinsent Masons, an international law firm, but that's probably the end of the story. I was born in Baghdad, actually, Iraq, but lived in Plymouth most of my life, and made my way to the city after I graduated and been to law school, and have spent the last 30 years as a lawyer working in a law firm.
Did you always want to be in law? When did you get that early influence and inspiration to get into it?
So there is literally no legal history in our family at all.
Interesting.
Living in a seaside port, particularly a naval port of Plymouth, I was actually, for a long time, I think, thinking about going into the Navy. I'm not great with the sea, and probably decided that was not the right course of action. Yeah. I always loved history and loved English. So those were two interesting topics for me at school. Yeah. Some weird chemistry in my mind probably thought, that sounds like an interesting combination. Law, guessing what law might be like, could be quite an interesting deployment of those two skills. So I ended up literally with no background going to do a law and history degree. And as they say, the rest is history.
Yeah, fair play. Love the pun. And is that a lot of people make decisions at that point and they get it wrong. There's no passion and so on. So you've got the interest in history and you've got the interest in English, and then you fuse that to law. Did that just then ignite you? Did you feel that? Because there's a real energy from you and passion, and you're the senior partner of a big law firm. But has that passion always been
something really clicked? It's a great question, and something definitely clicked. To be honest, my A-level results were not stellar. These days, I suspect I wouldn't actually make it through our algorithms to come into the firm. So it probably shows you a little bit about how life has changed. And I got the university place, and I was really determined. At that point, I thought, I'm actually going to own my career and my decisions. And there was a real turning point when I went to university, which is I'm actually not going to rely on anyone else to help me get to where if I try and fail, it will be because I've not made it myself. So I'm not relying on teachers or friends and that there's a turning point there. It was the oddest thing with no background in law that it just did literally click on the first day in lectures. It kind of all made sense. Well, certainly my first day as a trainee, when I first got a job, I remember having a conversation with one of the partners. He said, what do you want to do? I said, well, I want to be a corporate lawyer, and ultimately I want to be a partner. And I know at that point he looked back and went, "Oh, it's bold." But the reality is, it just felt like my sort of space. Now I suspect there's a whole load of luck in there, and but it is.
You make your own luck though, and there's a lot talked about now about manifestation and obviously goal setting, and that's something we'll come on to from a leadership point of view and so on. But that's an early scenario where you were like, "That's what I want to do," and you're sitting here and you've done it.
Here it is. And the lovely story, I suppose, the bookend it, is I'm the senior partner of a firm I joined as a trainee just over 30 years ago. And I really hope that's a lovely story for other people to say,
inspiring.
It's okay. It's available to all of you. And by the way, even if you haven't got the best start in life with your academics, there are routes in. And I think these days, actually, there are other routes in. We have apprentices in our firm who are solicitor or paralegal apprentices, not coming with university degrees. I love that. I mean, for me, this element of the social mobility piece I'm really passionate about, particularly in today's world, that different experiences, different perspectives, different entry points into our profession. That's part of the excitement. And actually, in a world like ours, legal services is not now just about the law. It is about your understanding of technology, of AI. It's maybe using other skill sets. You're an engineer by background, or do you have a background in big pharma? Because actually these skills and experiences are blending increasingly into what we do.
Like interchangeable. Because it's weird you said that, because I was going to pick up on the fact that you mentioned your A-level results and perhaps you wouldn't get in. And there's a real barrier to entry that has been in the law profession of education and schooling. And I've said it before on this program that I do feel a big part of the education system is broken, it's archaic. And so there are people that are coming through that system and they're disillusioned of what they want to do. And actually that's quite inspiring, because one, someone in your profession as passionate as you are. Secondly, you're actually trying to help more and more people get involved. But what I'd love to ask you, and this is sort of tapping into that leadership side of things, is what more can be done for young people in schools to almost try and find that passion ignited? Because you worked out you liked history and English, and you meshed that together. I remember being asked at school, what is it that you like doing? I didn't really know. And I didn't know how to mesh that together, so then appointed a career. So starting that earlier and actually making that real from a profession point of view. It might be that that's not someone aspiring to be a lawyer, but what do you think can be done, what needs to be done for kids at a younger age to be able to be more entrepreneurial and more meshing together those interests?
And it's a great question, and it's something we've spent a lot of the last 12, 18 months really thinking about. So firms like ours have a long history of doing really worthy things in our communities. We have responsible business programs where perhaps people will go over to a local school at lunchtime and do a reading class. We've hosted a slightly intimidating program of a school debating competition where schools from the East End of London come in. The judge is a High Court judge and you're debating against each other. All of which are really good, worthy things, but they don't actually leave a lasting legacy.
No.
They go back to school and go back to their communities.
It's a good experience, though.
Brilliant experience. So I was really struck. I had mentored a class of Bangladeshi girls from a school one stop from Liverpool Street. And so when they came into our office, most of them had never actually been into the city before. They'd never been into an office like ours. They didn't really know the relationship between the reception team, a PA, the senior partner, none of these things actually were familiar to them. And so it really it struck me at that point in saying, what more could we do? Because actually they don't have this entry point. And with the nicest, from the best in the world, their parents, their friends, and probably the school isn't equipped to have that conversation.
No.
So the conversation then became, okay, well, how do we bring more people in from diverse backgrounds? So we need to look at the algorithms that we use to recruit our summer interns and our trainees, because most of these things are now online. If you're not careful, algorithms have a nasty habit of eliminating people. So you need to think very carefully about that. But when you come in, and this is very recent, only in the last few months, when you come in and spend time with us and start to understand what a professional services firm does, why don't you go and spend a couple of days with one of our clients? Maybe go to an engineering client. Suddenly, it's not just the legal profession, it's our business community that you're starting to open up. And actually, if you've been to an engineering client, why don't you go to one of our financial services client or a retail client? And you really use these summer intern programs,
getting perspective, getting experience, getting empathy.
Empathy, and you're opening your mind to, well, actually, there are 3 or 4 different businesses or industries, and I've gone from 0 to 4, and that's quite powerful. So the buy-in from our clients has been fantastic, because the brilliant thing about this is there seems to be across our business communities a real sense that this is important for them too. So we haven't really had to work very hard to put this stuff together. And that's really powerful.
And I can tell just by listening to you then, that's just probably the beginning. There's a lot of big corporates and companies that do the tick boxing exercise in the name of wellness, employee, well-being and so on. Whereas I think what's really coming across from you is that by spending time on that and educating these people, they're going to be better for the firm. They're going to be better people, which by default is going to make the company more profitable, have more clients and so on. That's clearly understood between the two of us, but it's crazy that how many big corporates do seem to just tick that box.
Yes.
You had Matthew Said into the firm.
We did.
His book, is it You Are Awesome?
So with You Are Awesome. This is going to be a plug for all of his books now. Black Box Thinking, Bounce, Rebel Ideas. He's got some great stuff in. We brought him in. One of my colleagues had read his book, and they said, "Oh, it's really interesting." Black Box Thinking was the starting point, and it was really looking at how do you create an environment where people are learning from. I don't want to use the word mistakes. Learning from experience. Let's use that. Thinking about, well, how can I do something better? How can I do something differently? What sort of environment do I need around me? And the book's based around comparing the healthcare sector with aviation. Healthcare, very hierarchical, very paranoid about making mistakes and crucially acknowledging mistakes. Aviation, much flatter structures, quick to learn, quick to roll out solutions. Sure. And I was really struck by the parallels between health and law. And I thought, well, that'd be really interesting just to get Matthew's perspective. And what is it?
So you led on that whole initiative.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. And that was really about, so what are the techniques that you can start to learn? And so one very simple thing, which we borrowed from Matthew and actually from the red arrows, there's an interesting Venn diagram. The red arrows after every sortie will look back at what they've done and they'll have a debrief led by the most senior person. So it's a totally safe environment. So there are no apologies and there's no finger pointing. It's just a cold analysis, no judgment. What can we do better? What have we learned? What can we do better next time? And so we started after major matters. I was a corporate lawyer. So we said, okay, after the next major deal, let's get the deal team in a room, from the senior partner through to the PAs and the trainees involved. And let's do a debrief and see what did we learn from that in a non-fault basis. And they were in the room for about 2 hours. I wondered what was going on in there after a while. They came out as the most empowered group of people I've seen for a long time. The trainees felt they'd learned a lot more. The senior partner had gone first and said, this is my experience, this is what I'm going to do differently next time. And it was just a great example of, look what we've just learned about ourselves and what we're going to do better next time.
Yeah.
The fun bit of that is we ask our clients for a debrief as well and say, third party contacts a client and says, what was your experience of working with us? Our little game with ourselves is, can we do our debrief and get that to the client before they give the debrief back to us? Because that ability to say, well, we would have raised that, but I noticed Pinson Masons had already thought about it, was fantastic and gave people a real buzz and a sense of, oh, okay, there's a bit of competitive, and Matthew would love this, the competitive element of how do I do that better?
I mean, that's the thing, because that's a big part of the sort of the mission, if you like. Well, it's mission led is a key part of, and it's real. I love that because there's a lot of BS out there in context, and so is that something you're actively promoting and almost building upon? Because it feels like that's at the heart of yourself. And everything starts from the leader, and you are literally leading Pinson Masons. So is that the start of, or first of other things you're going to be doing? And
that's really the real privilege for me is in this position. I spend my life trying to absorb as much as I can in terms of learning from other people's experiences without being slavish, but just being a little bit of a magpie and say, oh, that sounds really interesting. How might that work? So, and you can play around with this. I was on a kick-off meeting yesterday with a big team from our finance group, and this is a whole initiative about how can we reimagine the world of providing finance advice to our client base. We've got technical capability, we've got AI, we've got paralegal teams, we've got new technology and processes. Legal advice in this area has probably been provided in this way for 150 years.
Just replicated cookie cut.
Absolutely. And the great thing, the group of people on the call was incredibly diverse. So you had software technicians, you've got members of our paralegal hub, you've got top-end lawyers. The the thought was, okay, well, how do you bring all that experience together and reimagine how you could do it? It was classic Matthew Syed territory.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's now over a big part of our business. So that's the privilege from my perspective.
And what I love about that is a couple of things. Firstly, you mentioned mistakes a couple of times, which you could interpret as bumps in the road or failures.
Yes.
You're now pioneering. I was actually going to ask you, where does AI fit in, and where are you with all the technical advancements? How do you embrace that as a firm? But by default, by doing that, you're being innovative. You're potentially being first. You're quite prepared to fail, to make mistakes, because it's clear you know that you learn from that.
Yes.
And yet that's something as a leader, as an entrepreneur, there's often been a fear of failure.
Yes.
What's been your experience of that? And you mentioned the 30-year journey.
Yeah.
How long did it take you to really understand that? And I guess you've had failures and bumps along the way to learn from it. And what have you learned?
Absolutely. And actually, the reality is you never stop learning, because although I don't work as a full-time lawyer anymore,
Sure.
I'm actually still learning to be a leader, and you know, I make mistakes, and there'll be things I can learn in that department as well. I mean, it's particularly acute, I think, in the professions, that there is an expectation, and sometimes it's generated from within, certainly within the firm and in relation to the client, that you don't make mistakes. People are paying a lot of money for this advice, and therefore it has to be right every single time. I slightly take a quote from Matthew in a different context. He said, he'd written an article which said, Olympic athletes are not Olympic athletes every day of the 4-year cycle. They can't be. You can't perform at the highest level like that. We do, because we have to.
And people are expecting you to. They're paying you to. They rely on you to.
Absolutely. So the background to this was actually an environment where you can make mistakes and acknowledge it and learn from it. Is actually, the starting was really hard, because that's not the background. So and with Matthew's help, what we said is, okay, you've got to disentangle two things. You've got to get the law right. You've got to get the advice right. That's what people are paying for. The delivery of that advice, whether that's using technology or new processes, is different. And if you bring the client with you and say, we're going to try something different here, which, if we get it right, should enhance your experience. Actually, we need you on the journey with us. We need your feedback. We need you to understand that this may not be perfect. Is that all right? That's the mental bit.
Well, you've managed their expectations, and you've put an arm around the whole thing and said, we're in this together. Are you with us or not? And it's probably quite difficult to say no. Unless it's a ruthless, we have to achieve, but actually no, because we could, potentially what you're saying is you could actually achieve a far better result than just cookie cutting, because we've always done this, which is awesome.
Now, the key thing, actually I used it in the kickoff meeting I was talking about yesterday, is that does require you to embrace imperfection. And that there is I wouldn't say that, I don't think we've cracked that, because it's in our DNA and it's in our methodology, it's built into this expectation that perfection, even in a new system or process, is an expectation. And breaking that is really critical. And I think we're still on that journey.
I think, and especially if you're a leader and you've got reputational risk, you've got you have to be driven and ambitious to be able to do that. Then that element of not wanting to fail and not be perfect is actually you're at war with yourself. Right?
Yes, that's the thing.
And also you've got to have relentless kind of self-discipline, drive, and so on. I'd love to know what works for you, both mentally, to keep yourself mentally fit, motivated. You clearly brought Matthew Syed in, part of that. And physically as well, you're clearly in good shape. So I want to know what you do, whether it's the run in the morning or these leaders that get up at 5 a.m. and do the ice baths. I want to know what works for you.
That's the luck of genes, I suspect. I have actually started going to the gym twice a week, but that was very, very, very recent. And, I think really a product of the aging process, which is I can't trust the genes indefinitely.
Fair enough.
I've always been quite thoughtful about what I eat and drink, and thought, okay, well, if I'm not doing the exercise bit necessarily, so I'm definitely not in a marathon runner or a Ironman, the superhero end, absolutely not. I've always been quite thoughtful about the inputs. I think the mental exercise is the bit I actually love, and why working with Matthew, or you meet all these really exciting people who offer insights into perhaps how you, either personal development or business development, that's the bit that actually really interests me. And that's that. I could have been a corporate lawyer doing the deals I did for the rest of time in reality, and every deal was slightly different. But the reality is, the more experienced you get, the more you sort of know where things should end up and how you're going to get there. And I always loved, so that bit was part of the job. Actually, I always loved meeting the clients and talking about their business and learning about how they operate, what markets they're in, how they're going to develop that market. My job now requires me to do the same thing, and those clients have been brilliant now at sharing their experience with me as a leader.
That's awesome.
And that actually is really refreshing and invigorating.
And by default, you're stimulating your mental side because you're learning. You're genuinely interested in the same way I'm genuinely interested in this conversation. I'm learning from you. When you sit with a client, you're taking information. How can we, help you? What can we do? That's stimulating, and by default, you're learning.
Yes.
Have you prioritised that sort of mental mindset and growth all the way through? Is that something that, because I'm going back to that kind of almost inspiring the younger generation, did you have that yearning to learn quite young, or did it come as you got successful, as you gained traction and you, do you know what I mean?
Yes, and I think actually you might divide my career experiences into two phases. There's the phase where you're just accumulating technical and commercial experience and understanding how to operate I was an M&A lawyer, so learning about the process, the documentation, the commercial drivers of these deals. And so there's the narrow piece, which is the very traditional route of lawyers, which is just over years. This is Matthew's 10,000 hours of purposeful practice.
Yeah.
The reality is that's probably 7 or 8 years worth of lawyer time learning your trade. Yeah. When I then became a team leader for the first time, you're then thinking about something more than winning and delivering work.
Sure.
You're thinking about the development of a team. You're thinking about the management of a team.
So that was a mindset.
There's a mindset shift there, which is, this is completely different. Where am I going to look for help and support around that? And that's really where the second phase takes you into, okay, well, I've still got to be, I'm still a lawyer, clients still have expectations. I need to keep pushing that. I can't give that up and say, okay, I'm not going to think about the development and evolution of the way I do my legal work. At the same time, I now have in parallel to think about a few other things. And then as you develop, then part of the responsibility becomes financial performance of your team. And then suddenly you're looking at financial literacy alongside people literacy. And so there's a whole piece there that you're gradually building a whole parallel career in many respects.
I get that, but the discipline, the experience, and the mindset that was already there probably was a good, follow-on to then open that up. And actually, by default, sitting here, you've had a lot of success. I'd love to know, as you said, you're very humble with it, but ultimately that's why you're here. And I'd love to know what your definition of success is.
So it's interesting. And again, I think that's definitely for me shifted as my career has developed. So success at one point is, am I involved in a big deal, and do I have a meaningful role in that deal? Then it becomes, have I got the promotion? Am I going to become a partner? Am I going to win this client or this mandate? So it's quite binary. The definitions of success are quite binary, but at that point were important components in building my career. And actually quite tangible, because you can point to that and say, well, I've done that, almost tick, I'm on to the next thing.
Sense of achievement.
Sense of achievement. And you can write it down, you see it on people's CVs, it's on your online, people can look at that and say, I can see all of the success written down there. As I've moved into leadership roles, some of the definitions of success become a little less clear. Is success the fact that we've opened up a dialogue around social mobility? Is it the number of trainees or summer interns that we take on from a variety of social backgrounds? Is it the number of those who become partners? Is it the growth of the firm financially? Is it opening another office? And so your definitions of success actually become much broader, and in most cases, actually largely out of my personal control.
But you're accepting of that,
and that
which in itself is successful.
And I think that's a big learning for me.
Yeah.
And certainly all of us, you move from being, and it's quite different from that mindset I had when I moved from A levels to university, which is I'm owning this. Yeah. My mistakes are my mistakes, but I can't rely on anything. No. I have to do this myself. You've actually had to completely turn that around and say the reality is, in a business of 3,500 people, it cannot be the vision or the delivery of one person.
No.
And actually, you're then saying I'm relying on a group of people, a wide group of people. In fact, ultimately 3,500 people will drive success, and I can't control that.
No, but what I love is that you are doing everything you can to empower them and educate them and provide the best chance for them to be the best version of themselves, which is only going to help you.
Yep.
Someone watching or listening to this that's aspiring to be the senior partner of a law firm, what advice would you give to them coming through?
So now I say this to all of my colleagues as well. Ultimately, owning your own career is your responsibility. Our job as an employer is to support and nurture that, to provide the whatever skills and other things are required to help you succeed. Yeah. So feeling that sense of ownership, I think, is actually really important. Don't wait for things to come to you. You own them. So if you want to, in our world, if you want to go and do a client secondment because you want to develop some expertise in a particular sector with a particular client, you own that. Don't wait for the firm to say, I've got a great opportunity for you.
And so there's initiative there, isn't it? Using initiative, which is what you did. It goes back to that mindset you said where forget the A levels, I kind of did a bit of work, but didn't do as well as I could. Now I'm on it. Yeah. Now I'm. Yeah. And what do I need to do?
Yes.
So it's initiative. Yeah.
And I think alongside that, be inquisitive, be adaptable. We live in a world where everything's changing constantly. The reality is the new normal that we talked about probably 10 years ago is normal now, which is nothing is certain.
And be ready for all sorts of unforeseen stuff that's coming.
Yeah. Be able to pivot and say, it may be, goodness, we live in a world of economic and political uncertainty. Who knows? Pay attention to that, because for a business like ours, it does have a real world impact. If a jurisdiction is suddenly under government sanction, that can have a real world impact for businesses. So pay attention to these things. So this program called The News actually is quite an important program, and not just because of personal interest. It actually has business implications. So thinking about that macro bit, where do we fit in? Thinking about what is coming down the track, what are the skills might I want to develop?
So educating yourself and being completely both self-aware and worldly wise as much, because then actually you're in the best place to
and embrace your own personal imperfection. I know I'll have all sorts of faults. I know that, and that's because I'm not human if I'm not. So understanding that, embracing it, not taking it personally when someone says, "Could have done that better." Actually, I could. How might you help me do that?
Yeah, and I like that, because as a senior partner of a law firm, you said it 10 years ago. There's plenty that would have not said that, and it would be a very different conversation. And they're not prepared to. We're only doing these numbers, and we're only where we are because we're incredible, and it's because of me.
Yes.
You may well have set Pinsent Masons on a course that it wouldn't have gone if your choices, leadership weren't in place. Which actually, it's clearly working. Yeah. It's amount of people that are tick boxing, and that's it. I love the fact that you're very much, passionate about it, and the firm is benefiting. Ultimately, all the clients, everything. We've said that already.
Well, the legacy is that children from school in the East End of London end up somewhere in a business community as a result of some little intervention that we've made. Yeah. For me, I'd be perfectly happy with that, because that's that's made meaningful change for people.
There's a fulfillment there, and not once have we even thought about talking about what's the biggest deal you've done, what's the biggest contract. It's not that's the business. But actually, it's the education piece.
And it's incredibly and there's the great thing about that is never ending. Because you don't ever get to an end and say, right, I've learned everything I need to learn.
Yeah, sure.
The world is throwing up constant opportunities, constant learning, different perspectives. That's that means your journey's ongoing. You're never going to get to the end of it, and that actually is quite exciting. Okay, well, I'm constantly trying to look out for the next bit of learning that might make a difference.
Yeah, I can tell. Well, I've learned loads just talking to you now. You've been awesome, inspiring.
Brilliant. I'm really pleased.
What a great person to be leading Business Mason. So thank you for talking to me, Andrew. Really appreciate it.
No, thank you very much for your time. Really enjoyed it. Thanks, Joel.
Cheers.